Hello, everyone. Good morning. Just give me a couple of minutes. Just finishing up. Can you all hear me? Is it loud and clear and see me as well? And the PowerPoint? No last. Wonderful. That's great. I'm just gonna wait a little bit if we have some more people that want to join, that are allowed to join in before we get started. So we're just gonna give it a couple of minutes. Great, Omar. So how many of you guys have been working with ANPR cameras previously? Nice. Nice, Omar. So how many have been successful in doing that? Who has been working properly? That's great, Omar. Nice. All right, I think we can get started. I think most of you guys know me, but for those who don't know me, my name is Fahan. I'm the technical trainer here in the Nordic countries, and I'm usually in charge of the hands-on trainings over here at our office in our training room, where we have a lot of equipment set up. I'm also in charge of the certification trainings and presentations that we do mostly here in the Nordics. So apart from that, I do a lot of testing of different devices and also do a lot of the testing in my spare time. So as my wife usually says, I don't have any hobby apart from CCTV. So I think at some point I have to agree with her. That's very dear to me because I think it's super interesting, and being able to work with groundbreaking technology as we do here at Dahua, it's always fun. So that was just a little bit about me. Today, obviously, due to the situation, we are doing more and more webinars, and we are going to continue doing lots of webinars also after the new year. So it's going to be easier for you guys to participate, and I hope it benefits you a lot from these webinars as well. I can tell that some of you guys have already joined multiple of them, so that's great. I'm very grateful for that and happy that it adds some value to you guys. So, but today we're gonna be spending some time talking about ANPR cameras, getting you guys much more familiar with it, so you feel confident about it. Because if you don't feel very confident about a product like this, then it's gonna be very hard to make the end customer feel comfortable about it, right? So that's why we're going to dig a little bit into it to figure out what's the reason why it's not working that well, or what's the reason why it is working that well, how to figure it out, how to adjust to get it or improve it, instead of just trying something and seeing the outcome, but we don't really understand what we're doing, right? So the agenda for today is product selection, ITC, NVR, VMS. What possibilities does it give me in terms of having a system instead of just having a camera? Which scenarios and applications does it apply to? Where can I use this for which type of customers? Is it only special customers, and so on and so on? Then we're going to go through some of the requirement, which I think is, I guess, the most important part in ANPR solutions, how to install it, which height, which angle, so on and so on. So we actually get the best result out of it before we even start the assignment, instead of just starting up and then figure out alongside while we are doing it and wasting a lot of time. Because at the end of the day, we are there to make money, right? So if you want to make money and be successful and have happy customers, we have to be super efficient. And this is what I'm going to try to teach you guys today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the simple installations and the more advanced. Which things can we adapt? Which settings can we adjust in order to make it a little bit more accurate and make it more advanced where we are running it with a VMS? I'm going to go through all the configurations so you guys can see what I'm doing. You could get access to some of the cameras that I have over here, so you can sit and play alongside with me if you are into it. I can just show you how our setup is right here. You can see we have plenty of ANPR camera, and we have a street over there. So that's going to be our street. Great. This guy. So during the webinar, if you guys have any questions, there's going to be a Q&A session at the end of it. But if it's something that's super relevant to what we're talking about, you're always welcome to just stop me and then type in your questions in the chat box, and I'm going to try to answer it to my best extent. If there's something that I can't answer, I'll make sure to write it down and send you the information afterwards by email, because I have all of you guys' mails. So no worries about that. So any questions, just go ahead and stop me, and I'll try to explain it a little bit deeper. Or if there's something that I'm going through and if it's a little bit fast or you don't really get it, then obviously just let me explain it again. Just tell me. So no worry. It's quite casual. All right. So yeah, and different ways of managing blacklist, or sorry, not blacklist. Nowadays, we can't call it blacklist, whitelist. I guess it's better to call it block list and allow list, right? So in order not to offend anybody. So we are living in the time of offending. I would say maybe we could call it 2020 wasn't that good of a year. It was the offending year as well as the Corona year, right? So let's dig into it. When we are talking about ANPR cameras, there are a lot of different terms out there that you might be a little bit familiar with, but maybe you are misunderstanding why are these names so different? Do they have some different features? What makes the difference? Some call them ANPR, ALPR, LPR, ANPR, number plate recognition. So they have a lot of different names, but what it really means, it's the same thing more or less. If you're using a ANPR or LPR or whatsoever, whatever you want to call it to the left of it, it should be more or less the same. And the thing that they have in common should be that they are dedicated products. When we talk about Dahua cameras, we always refer to them as ANPR cameras only. So, but what they have in common is that they are all using a OCR algorithm, an optical character recognition. So what that does is it actually takes a picture like we have, that could be a street, for instance, and then from all the footage that we are getting in, it's going to locate the text, and once it sees the text, it's going to transcode it into recognizable text so that we get some letters and numbers out of it. So the camera actually understands the text. It's kind of like you know, when you have Google, for instance, and you're using a translate app, and whenever you tell something in the translate app, say something in the translate app, and you want to transcode it into something else, it's actually the same thing. That's just not optical, just by audio. So it's actually trying to transcode whatever you're saying from the audio content to text content. So this is more or less the same that our ANPR camera is doing, and this should be the main similarity between different products that are doing this. So there is some different manufacturers that are doing this software based on the VMS instead of doing it on the ANPR in itself in a dedicated product, which I would have recommended. Keep it as a dedicated product. Let that dedicated product do all the processing for the OCR, and the software should just pick up only the text part, and that's it. Because then we're not putting unnecessary pressure on the server side, right? Apart from that, when we also have a dedicated product for stuff like number plate recognition, obviously it makes sense to spend time and make full use of that instead of trying to get something to work, because at the end of the day, it all turns out, if you're trying to use a regular camera, yes, it's possible to use a regular camera. We are not using any algorithms apart from when you are using our AI-based 7 series cameras, which can actually also pick up number plates, or in AI NVR. What they're doing, they're actually just picking up all of it as well. But if you're doing number plate recognition, instead of trying to use something else which is not suitable for this purpose, I would recommend you guys to use this, because this is built for it. So whenever something is built for it, it doesn't make sense to use anything else. I hope you guys can agree with me. So when we try to look in the product selection in terms of which products can Dahua provide for you guys, whenever you want to look into the ANPR part, if you go to our website under the products and you go to the, I think it's traffic or parking, then you have a folder saying entrance and exit products. All right. When you go in there, you'll find two type of products. You'll find the ITC 215 PW6M, and you'll find the ITC 237 PW6M. So those are the latest products that we are using for ANPR. The main difference between these two are the left one is the short range and the right one is the long range. And I'm going to go into it a little bit deeper afterwards. So, but what you have to pay attention to whenever you're thinking about ordering these products is that they come with a different variety of mounting brackets, and you are not able to exchange them from one type of bracket to another type of bracket. These models, both of them, they come in a ceiling wall mount bracket with that one built in already. You can also buy them with a pole mounting bracket, and then it has this kind of round shaped ball underneath it, and then you can buy a pole. So when we are talking about the pole mounted housing, that's where you order the camera with the pole mounting housing, and then you buy the pole on the side of it. So the reason why we have this pole is because generally when we recommend to install ANPR camera, the recommended height is 120. Let me just get one of those brackets so you guys can see how it looks. Colleague is just gonna go get it so you guys can see how it looks. So generally, if you're thinking about pole mounting this one and you're gonna buy the pole from us, use this one, the one that we are providing over there, and this one only has a height of 120. So if you're already planning that you're gonna be mounting your camera higher than that, then the right side, the pole mounting bracket, is not the option for you. So just make sure to pay attention that which type of brackets you are looking into, and then the type of model. Then they also come in a variety where you have the possibility to choose if you want the camera with white light or with IR. So usually in the Nordic countries, we don't use the white light models. I don't know if some of you guys have tried with the white light models, because the reason why we don't use the white light model is because we don't want the light to shine directly on the driver once he's driving towards the camera. So we'd rather use IR, and we can get proper recognition anyway, so it's not an issue. Because when we are talking about OCR algorithms and ANPR camera, it's actually better for it to recognize characters when there's not color. When we're using black and white, it's actually a little bit easier than keeping everything in color. So we recommend you guys to look for those, the ones with IR. They're not going to be looking like these. They're just going to be kind of black over here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse when I'm pointing to something. Which one don't you like, Jim? No, exactly. Personally, I don't like it as well. I'd much rather just stick to the IR. Yeah, that's great, because it is easier as well for OCR to actually read letters where it's black and white and it's IR. So that I recommend it. But generally, just pay attention to whenever you're about to order something, make sure that you're ordering it where it says IR in the name. All right. So, and the bracket part. This is super important that you guys remember this part. So this is how it looks, the bracket that you can buy, easy to mount directly from the down side of it, from the bottom side. And this is where you just mount the camera with the ball underneath it, the one where the housing is like that, and then there you're good to go. The height is already set to the recommended height. All right, so let's talk about the differences in those two models. Which one should you choose when? When we look on the left side, the short range one, can read number plates from 3 meters to 8 meters. That's the maximum distance. And it can read them with a speed of up to 30 kilometers. So why is that? And how high is it recommended to mount? As I said before, 120 is the recommended height to install them on. I know that some installers tend to sometimes want to install them higher, right? I guess most of you guys get requirements to install it higher from the installers, right? Because it's not that common over here in the Nordics that you would be installing cameras at 120. Because that would be if you have a barrier, for instance, and you have the room for it and you can mount it, then it makes sense, then it's fine. But over here in the Nordics, we don't do that as often as you might be doing it in China, in India, in a lot of other countries. You want these cameras to be mounted on a wall, on a building. So, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about which one I would recommend to use generally. So since we have a 3 to 8 meters range, we have a shorter speed. And why do we have a shorter speed than the one to the right? Because they are more or less the same camera, but just with a larger lens, so a wider lens. So the reason for that is if you have a shorter range to read a number plate, then you also have a shorter area, shorter time in once you have the car passing by. So the faster the car is, the shorter time the camera gets to actually recognize the number plate compared to the long range one. Obviously, these accuracies in terms of distances, they vary a little bit in approximately 15%, depending on the scenario, how good the scenario is. And generally, our cameras do a pretty good job. Obviously, if you have a lot of different light coming from different places, then it's not going to make it easier. So try to get a as neutral environment as possible. Like with any other analytics, the more neutral the scenario, the better, because it's going to make the job easier for the camera. Think about it as if you're at a nightclub. I hope there's nobody in nightclubs nowadays since the COVID-19 situation, but think about it as a nightclub situation. You're standing in the middle of a nightclub, you have a lot of different light flashing, and if somebody is asking you, can you recognize that guy over there? Which guy? Which one of them, first of all? That's another situation. But it's going to be hard to determine him because your eyes are constantly trying to adapt to the situation. It's exactly the same thing that happens with an ANPR camera. It's always trying to adapt to the situation. So if the situation is changing too quickly, too frequently, too much light coming from different sources, then it's going to be more difficult. This is built for headlights when they are driving towards, when the car is driving towards the camera with the headlights, it's built for that. So don't worry, I'm not talking about the headlights. So, but when we are talking about the long range one of the reasons I would personally recommend you guys to use the long range model in, I would say, 80% of the situation, 90% of the situations. And why is that? Because there's also going to be something regarding the angle that we're going to talk about. Because if you go ahead and install this 215 at a height of, let's assume, 2 meters, 2.5 meters, then you're going to have a very, very sharp angle towards the number plate, right? So whenever you have a very sharp angle towards the number plate, then it also means that you're making it harder for the camera to read the number plate. I'm going to show you a couple of examples and what happens. So why do I recommend the long range one? Next, also because we have a wider range of area, we have 4 to 25 meters, so that gives us a little bit of room for adjustment in terms of zooming in, zooming out, because at the end of the day, everything is about getting that number plate in the right size. That's the number one thing, and obviously get a sharp image of the number plate for the OCR motor to actually transcode it into letters. So we get the correct letters and not just something that looks like an O or looks like a B or whatsoever our numbers. So the reason for, since it has a wider range, it also gives us a speed advantage that we can capture cars driving up to 60 kilometers. You can imagine if the camera is just pointing down the road in the vicinity, you have a longer time for the camera to recognize the number plate than you would have with the short range model. Another situation is, for instance, what about trucks? Because one of the differences with trucks and regular cars is that the headlights are located slightly higher or significantly higher than the regular cars, right? So if you had a camera mounted at 120 or meters height, then you will end up blinding it directly. So when you're using the 215, for instance, for a distribution center at a gate, I would recommend you to install it at a height of 2 meters for the short range one. So the long range, short range, you're going to figure it out which one to use when I go through some of the other content. So you can extend these ranges a little bit up to 10 meters with the short range one and up to 30 meters with the long range one if you have some external sources, like if you have better lighting conditions exactly where you want to read the number plates, external IR, then it's possible to reach longer distances. Give me a sec. So those are my recommendations. I hope it's quite clear for you guys which to use in which situation, right? So let's look through the, that's the distance. That's the distance. Usually I would recommend you guys to only, the width of it should just be one car lane. I'm gonna go through some of that as well. So that's the distance, Frederick. So let's try to look at some of the possibilities when we are talking about ANPR cameras and what can I do, what do I need, when, and how can I put this together? How can I create a simple solution compared to a more advanced solution? So when we are talking about a ANPR camera only, and obviously it needs some power, you can power them with 24 voltage, so you don't have to have a PoE switch. I would generally recommend you guys to install it together with a PoE switch, because then you can hook up your laptop, configure everything. So, but what you can do is, in a very simple solution, you can have you can have a ANPR camera, install an SD card in it, then you can connect a barrier to it if you want to, and that's it. You don't need anything else. You can handle the blacklist, whitelist, or sorry, the block list, allow list directly in the camera. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to have it connected up to a bigger server or an NVR or whatsoever. Many other manufacturers are also doing so. Just the camera in itself is enough to actually solve a entrance case for, that could be a gated community, that could be anything. If they just want to add some number plates in it, you could just do it by the network. You can also port forward this camera, and then you could sit over at the office and type in all those number plate that needs to be block listed or allow listed. So, and that's it, nothing else. So that's the simple solution. Obviously, when you're connecting it to a barrier, it's the alarm output from the camera. You have 3 different outputs on these cameras, no matter whichever you choose. And then you also have, I think it's 2 or 3 inputs as well. And where to use the inputs, I'm going to show you a couple of examples. You can do this with the standalone solution as well. When we go to the solution 2, it can consist of the same type of cameras, but in this situation, we would like to have an NVR, for instance. And the reason why we wanted to have an NVR is that we want to manage a block list, allow list directly from the NVR. Apart from that, other advantages we also get is that we get to record everything in an NVR. And we can also hook up a screen, HDMI screen, directly. As you can see here, we can hook up a monitor directly to the NVR, and then we can get a live image. We can get all those cars coming in. We can see the number plates on the side, and I'm gonna show it to you guys later on once we get to the hands-on part. So, but the maximum for each NVR recommended is 4 channels of ANPR cameras. Then we can manage all the blacklist, whitelist from there. Once you directly connect the ANPR, automatically you're gonna get the possibility to add in number plates in the allowed list, and then they're gonna be sent to the ANPR cameras directly. So recommended 4 channels, stick to that and you'll be good to go. So, and yes, if somebody starts wondering about, well, what about if I wanted to have different allow list, block lists in the different cameras, in terms of if I have different people coming in from different gates? That's usually not the case for small solutions with 4 ANPR cameras, because usually it might be a premises where you would have the same people who are allowed to drive in with just 1 block list, allow list. So if it's mandatory for you to have everything divided, I would recommend you to either, you can go with the standalone solution where you have each camera, you are individually defining the allow list, block list for them, and then you just keep on uploading whenever you want to exchange something, or you go for a VMS platform. So regularly we recommend the 5 series NVR or the 5 series AI NVR, which copes very well with ANPR. So, and the advantage for this is as well, let's assume you have a customer who might not be interested in ANPR from the beginning, but where you already see the potential for him. Maybe in the future he's building something where it might require to add some ANPR cameras. So in order to give him that possibility, again, I would recommend you guys to install a 5 series or a 5 series AI NVR over the customer, because then you could just add them to the NVR. You don't have to exchange some equipment. If you are, for instance, using a 4 series NVR, which doesn't support the NPR part, then you're going to have to exchange that. And obviously the customer isn't going to be happy with paying a lot of money for something that they need to get exchanged at some point, right? So then we have the solution 3. That's the more complex solution. In this solution, we have added a VMS solution where we are using either DSS Express or DSS Pro. We can use both of them. So in this situation, we might have multiple sites where we want to control everything. We want to be able to see all those cars coming in and out of the gates. We also want to be able to create like events, alarms, Let me just show you some more parts of the solution. Over here in this solution, we also get the possibility to add VTOs. And where would I need VTOs? Usually when you drive to the airport, you might have a barrier in order to let you get inside the parking area, right? And then there might also be a calling system. For let's assume that the parking system, something's wrong with it. It's not reacting to once I'm pushing the button to get a ticket or whatever it is. Then there is a service button I can click and then call, and then I'm gonna get the connection to an operator. It's more or less meant to be in the same way for the VTO connection. VTO stands for the video intercom solutions that we have. So when you have a VTO, what it can do is it can actually call directly to the management or the client manager. That could also be a guard sitting there with the DSS client directly with it, and then he'll get a pop-up with a call, and he can remotely open up the barrier or actually have a two-way talk with that person. So he actually figures out if I should actually allow this person to get in, because there could be multiple reasons why it's not reading the number plate. That could be a guest, that could be a lot of different things. That could be somebody who has too much snow on their number plate, so you could only read half of it, and then obviously the system can't open up. So then you'd have to get somebody to remotely verify. That's where you can use a VTO. And the barrier, you can actually, with the ANPR camera, this also applies to the last part here with the loop. This applies also to a completely standalone solution with the ANPR, because since it has multiple inputs and outputs, what could we use these inputs and outputs for? Is there anybody who is in doubt about what these loops are? Have anybody been trying to use loops for parking solutions? Right, I guess not. All right, a loop, where would you use a loop? Generally, loops are used in many different situations. When we're talking about a loop, or in Danish it's called spol. So when we're talking about a loop, it's usually a wire that you cut out some part of the surface. You actually cut out a line in the surface of the flooring, and then you put in a loop that's connected to a loop detector. So whenever there is a car on top of this loop detector gets a signal, and then it can actually send a alarm input directly to the camera by 2-wire, and then the camera snapshots. So this means as well, when we are talking about loops, you would usually use loops also to trigger barriers, for instance. So whenever there is a loop, usually that loop, you would use two loops on one side of it from the entrance side and one from the exit side. Because what those loops can do is make sure that that barrier doesn't fall down in your head where if you're walking, or let's assume if the car is stopping, maybe something happened to the car in between where the barrier is in the middle of the car. Obviously, you don't want that barrier to hit the car. So if you don't want that to hit the car, that's why you use two loops, because the first loop is to verify now there is a car here. So the barrier should open once it gets a signal from the ANPR camera, because it has read the number plate from the signal from the loop. And then if it's allow listed, this number plate, then it's gonna send a signal to the barrier. The barrier is gonna open, and once the barrier is open, the barrier is not gonna close until the car passes loop number 2. So once it passes loop number 2, you can connect the loop number 2 directly to the barrier, or you can connect it to the camera and then the barrier. Then the barrier is gonna close afterwards. So this is just a very safe system if you're using barriers. So all of this happens in a matter of seconds. So it's nothing you have to sit and wait around for, just to let you guys know. So, but that's possible. The barrier part is possible, and the loop part is possible completely standalone as well. So this is how you could use a loop solution with a VTO as well. And if you want to store that on an NVR as well, you can still use the NVR for storage. You can also store that directly in the VMS platform. That's also a possibility. So the advantage is you can remotely trigger barriers for a lot of different locations. You can create alarms for an event center. If there is one guard sitting and watching a lot of different sites, then he can actually create an alarm if there is, for instance, a specific car or suspicious car, and he wants to get notified if this car reaches any other of the sites that he's guarding, or that could be shopping malls, anything, or apartment buildings. Then he will get an alarm directly in the event center, so he knows exactly, he has the documentation, he can write notes with it directly if he's using a VMS. And also, for instance, if we distinguish the DSS Express and Pro, if you're using Express, the recommended maximum is 8 channels for ANPR. And by the way, for DSS Express, 2 channels are already for free. So if you're using the DSS solution, the maximum is 500 ANPR cameras. So if you're already thinking about a system or already encounter a customer who has a larger system, then definitely go ahead and play around with DSS Pro. It works great, just to let you guys know. So where does this apply? Obviously, bigger solutions handle block list, allow lists for multiple sites at the same time. Manage person, because when we are using the VTO solution, many of our VTO solutions have card readers as well. So in DSS, for instance, you can add all the information for individuals. That could be number plates, that could also be cards. You can add them to the system so that the person, whenever he's holding this card, then he's allowed to go in and out. You can add face recognition terminals as well that would recognize the face and open up whatever is needed to open up as well. So that part, you can manage everything in DSS. You don't have to have multiple different systems to do that. And you can also choose, for instance, if there is a specific number plate in terms of ANPR or just an event with a specific car, you can also just push that alarm to some specific client users and not all of them at the same time. If you have multiple different operators operating different types of sites, then maybe some alarms only apply to some of them. Then you can choose exactly who should get these different alarms. So to sum everything up, very simple, standalone, you could use with SD card, or you could choose a solution with NVRs, or you can use with DSS Express or Pro V8. So these are the main advantages. If there's anybody who wants these PowerPoints, don't worry, I'm gonna share those ones with you at the end of it. I assume that you guys wanna sit down and spend some time with this, and actually maybe you could use some of the material to make your own material for some customers if you wanna explain it to them. Yes, you can. You can choose whichever, wherever you want to send an email to once you get the alarm input as well. In the camera in itself, it has an SMTP protocol, so you can actually add in whichever email you want to get these, block listed alarms. Whenever there is a car that's in the block list, you want to have a notification. So if that was what you were asking about. There is actually possibility to use vegan protocol with these cameras. We have a small box, a vegan box. Once you connect that, we have a complete guide for how to connect that and also make it work. We have a small box that comes with a vegan output. So you connect it to the camera, and then you can connect it to some third-party access control system. So this is possible, yes, Doc. Hope it answers your question. You could just add me at the end of this. You could just add me on LinkedIn as well. If you have more questions regarding that part, Doug, I can also help you get a little bit closer to working out a solution for you for the vegan part. Okay? So when we are talking about DSS, this is actually what you get. When we are talking about, when we are talking about the easy management and monitoring, when you're using DSS Pro V8, this is how it looks when you have easy monitoring. You have a monitoring window with DSS Pro. You can have your map located over here. You can also have all your regular cameras. That doesn't have to be ANPR cameras necessarily. That could also be access controls where you want to control the doors. So this is actually the main window for the operator. He will get all the different types of alarms over here, because Over here, he can also limit it that he only wants the ANPR part, so all the number plates are coming here, because maybe the motion detection alarm is not necessary for him to sit and pay attention to right now. So this is possible, and he can also just play back the events directly from here. In the bottom of it, there's going to be a timeline as well, and then he's going to be able to see those recordings only in those windows, so he can keep on monitoring everything else. So the monitoring feature in DSS Pro V8 is amazing. So it's quite new to us as well, but we are getting used to it little by little with more and more of these features. When we look at the trigger events, this is how it looks. Whenever there's an event, pops up over here, plays a sound, whatever you want to do, pop up in the client directly and show a couple of other cameras. That could also be a PDZ camera that's monitoring some other areas. Whenever there is a blocklisted alarm, we have set the system to actually get the PDZ to move over to a specific preset and show us that image live, so we can see everything what's happening and not just the image of the number plate. So we can locate it on a map wherever this car is located as we speak, or where this site is where we are getting these triggered alarm, because everything is in some situations a matter of seconds, where you locate exactly what's happening, when is it happening, why is it happening. And over here, this is how it looks. You get the number plate out here, you get the small snapshot picture. Unfortunately, I don't have any recording connected to it right now, but you'll be able to get the live view as well. And then we have the last part is DSS Agile. I think this is what you were referring to as well, Frederick. Some way of getting notified by push message could also be another way. So you get all the push notifications directly to your phone, to the DSS Agile app. As you can see, you get the alarm over here, and then you can choose whatever you want to do about it afterwards. So which scenario applies to installing ANPR solution? I wouldn't say that there is any solution that's too small for ANPR. Maybe not inside the house, but if you have a villa or something, that's also possible. If somebody has, for instance, let's assume a motorized gate that they wanted to open up automatically whenever their car approaches, or the wife's car approaches, or let's assume you have your mother-in-law, you can add it to the block list, and then you could get a push notification whenever your mother-in-law is on the premises. That's also a possibility with these kind of solutions. So it applies to very simple solutions. It could also apply to gated communities or ungated communities, apartment building areas. That could be warehouses as well, for instance, distribution centers. We have some customers, some bigger customers that are using these solutions for distribution centers, so they can always have a logged file, recorded file, whenever a car is driving into their premises, and know exactly when did this car leave the premises, at which day. Or if we have some damage, for instance, and we need to prove the concept of, or not prove the concept, but just if we need to have evidence in terms of there was a car who broke the gate, which car was it, and how to locate that driver at the end of the day, instead of just saying we don't know, it was some truck. So that's how we can use the number plate part as well. It's being used at airport as well as we speak. In Copenhagen Airport, they already have a ANPR solution from our side as well. Not in Copenhagen, sorry, in Billund. So there's a lot of different ways and scenarios to apply this. There's not really any limits to it. So since it's become much easier to set up, and it's rather much more affordable, then obviously it opens up the market to install it lots of more different places. So I remember I have previously been installing CCTV as well. Whenever I was doing CCTV installations, I'm talking about when I was working with some of the first ANPR solutions that I had encountered. That was, I guess it was some like 8-10 years ago. Then it was very, very tricky. The image was completely dark. The only thing we could see was the number plate, because we didn't have such a good sensor. And we had to increase the shutter speed quite significantly, and hence the rest of the scenario was completely dark. And I think it was quite difficult to set up ANPR solutions previously. I don't know if some of you guys have been challenged throughout the years before in terms of installing ANPRs that it have been quite difficult to get to work properly, and then in the end you end up losing a lot of money because you spend too much time on a solution that you're struggling with. Has anybody tried that? Me too, don't worry. So luckily not anymore. We have some very simple, strict guidance in terms of requirements whenever we are talking about ANPR solutions. So the first part, which is the most important part for an ANPR camera, is the installation height and angle. Second part is that we need to make sure that the number plate is in the right size. So it is possible to get number plates read at 100 pixels, but the optimal size of the pixels, and whenever I'm talking about the size of the pixels, I'm talking about the width of it. So the width is optimal at 150 pixels. So it is possible as well at 130 to 160. That's not a problem, but generally recommend you, this should be your aim, to reach those 150. If you reach those 150, then you don't have anything to worry about in the terms of the size of the plate. So you're good to go. If you have, and I'm going to show you guys how it looks when we have a too small number plate compared to a number plate in the right size. Because at the end of the day, it's all a matter of helping that OCR in the best way we can, and that is to provide a good image for the OCR to read from. The better the image we have to read from, the easier it is for it to recognize these numbers, and also easier for it to distinguish, for instance, a B from an 8. So some of these misunderstanding, or an S from a 5, that can also sometimes be, or 2, sorry, 2 from an S, that can sometimes be difficult. But as long as you have the optimal size, then you should be good to go. So then it says possible ranges from 100 to 240 pixels. Why? Because sometimes we might have narrower number plates. That could be for motorbikes, for instance. You don't have the width of it, but you have the height of it. And in the camera, you can adjust some of that stuff. I'm going to show you as well. Because when we don't have enough pixels, let's assume we have 50 pixels, this is kind of how it looks. I have actually cut out the full size of the image, measured out when I had the 50 pixels, made a lot of snapshots with different ranges. And then once the size of the plate was 50 pixels, I cut out this part to show you how it actually looks. Even for us, it's not possible to distinguish when we only have 50 pixels, right? So then we go to 70 pixels, 100 pixels, 120, and 150. And I think it's quite obvious to anyone to see on the largest image over here. It's very, very simple and clear to read the number plate. So this should definitely be our aim, as close as we can get. Between 130 and 150 is okay. So, and in terms of achieving that, it's a matter of zooming in and zooming out and making sure that that size of plate, and we have a lot of great guidance for that, so don't worry. So as I said before, obviously sometimes we might have a smaller number plate that might not be as wide, and also the height of it. So that is allowed in the camera in itself. We can adjust the minimum and maximum for it. So there is a lot of different number plates. Some in Iceland or other countries might be a little different from these ones, but these are the ones that we use in Denmark, and we can read for all of them, so it shouldn't be any problem whatsoever. So in terms of how to mount the camera on the installation, that should be the first part of your work. Whenever you are assessing a job out there or an assignment at a customer, just like with analytics, the 80% of the job is actually having the proper scenario, right? And it's the same thing applies to when we're using ANPR cameras. If we have a proper scenario where we can place the camera, then it makes sense. Let's assume you have a road, a small or entrance, but the cars could be coming from the side, like 2 meters from where the camera is located, and also from the other side. Then obviously that's not an optimal scenario for the camera, right? So stuff like this is what you need to look for. Or that could also be an area which is too wide. That could be where the camera is located. I don't know if you guys can see this. If the camera is located here and you have the entrance somewhat over here. It might be a little bit too difficult for you guys to see. I don't know if you guys can see that, but if you have this area from where the camera is located, if that area is too wide, if it's an open space, then it's going to be impossible for the camera, because the cars can be coming in from the side of the camera in multiple ways, right? So this is what we want to avoid. We want to have one lane. That's going to make it much easier for us, because then we can control it. Because if you look at barrier systems, for instance, at shopping malls, they have everything divided completely in lanes. And that's not only for the barrier, that's also for the cameras. So we know the car should be located in the width exactly in the same place, as same as possible, at least. So if you have like an open square where people could be driving in from like a range of 8-10 meters, then forget it. Don't spend time on it, or at least tell the customer that this is not going to work out, whichever system you have, because there's too big of an width in the entrance of it. So if we look at some of the angling part, where to install it, the best place to have the camera installed, if we are just looking into recognizing number plates, would be in front of the car, right? Directly in front of the car, it's kind of like how if I need to recognize a person, the best way to do that is if he's standing 100% in front of me. That's going to make it easier for me to recognize him, right? If I'm standing to the side of it, it's difficult for me to recognize him, right? So this is exactly the same for an ANPR camera. There's a lot of logics to it when you come to think about it. If it's hard for you to recognize the number plate, it's going to be hard for the camera 100%. So there is a limit that says that the angle cannot be more than 30 degrees. So when I'm talking about 30 degrees, I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So we need to make sure to have 150 pixels, and we cannot exceed the angle cannot be more than 30 degrees. So those are the ones we need to pay attention to. So if you're having trouble with some of it, make sure to write this stuff down, or at least look through the PPT whenever you are going to do an installation. Keep this stuff in mind. This is super important, or else you're going to spend too many hours trying to get something that's to work, which is not meant to work, at least. So this is kind of how it's going to be looking like. Imagine that the number plate is going to be seen from somewhat the side of it if we are having too sharp an angle, if the car is too close to the number plate camera to read the number plate, right? So another part is, for instance, versus this one. Much better pixels, better reading. And better reading because if you're looking at these characters over here, it's going to be harder to tell them apart when they're completely next to each other so closely, right? There's more or less no gap between them. So the OCR is going to be having a very tough time distinguishing them, reading these number plates as well. So then we have something like the maximum angle for the number plate, especially from the side of it. The more it's tilted, the harder it is as well to read the number plate, or what to say, recognize the characters. Other parts we need to pay attention to is the vertical angle. So the vertical angle over here cannot exceed 30 degrees as well. This is exactly the same thing that happens over here. Imagine that I have to recognize a car that is standing very close to the building. I have to recognize the number plate. That's going to be much more difficult for me, instead of having to recognize a car from this window that is, let's assume, 10 meters away or 5 meters away, as long as it's I have enough pixels. So this is exactly the same thing. And also 5 degrees up and down in terms of once we have placed the camera needs to make sure not to have too much of a tilt to it. So when we have the camera over here, we actually have a way of calculating down here. As you can see, the ratio between the distance of the camera and angle is where we need to pay attention. And this is why I was telling you guys I would recommend generally to use long range cameras, because when I use long range, if I use a short range camera for a solution like that, let's assume I install it at a height of 2.5 meters or 2 meters. Then you can imagine, if I need to make sure to keep those 150 pixels, then the car has to be quite close to me. Then I have to lower the angle. And what happens if I lower the angle? The angle is going to be too sharp. The angle is going to be too high, and I'm not going to be able to keep those 30 degrees. So if I want to keep those 30 degrees when I elevate the camera, I have to zoom in more and more. And the more I zoom in, that's going to limit me, because at some point I'm not going to be able to zoom in enough to get those 130, 150 pixels in the width of the number plate. That's why I'm going to encounter a limitation from the short range camera when I want to install it at a 2 meters height, for instance, compared to 120. So I hope it's very clear why you should consider looking into more or less trying to use a long range one as much as possible. So does anyone have any questions regarding those things I just went through? Because that's the most important stuff I just went through. If you don't understand this or don't see the logics to it, please feel free to ask, because this is going to be a lifesaver for you guys out there on the installations. If you're not getting that part right, then don't bother. That's what I would recommend. Don't bother. So this would be a typical installation. If you have the 120 height, you would usually have a virtual trigger line at 4 meters of a distance. You would have a big enough size. This is from Billund Airport in Denmark. So this would be excellent to read the number plates of the taxis that are coming in, who are allowed to actually stay in that area, and not just any car, only taxis. They have a VTO system installed as well, that is connected to a larger parking system that we have. We have a dedicated parking solution that goes much, much deeper, not only for ANPR, but for other products as well, called PMS, unfortunately, Parking Management Solution. I didn't name it, but it's called PMS, and that is much more suitable for like huge parking houses, for instance, if you want to check each spot which is available, which isn't, and you want to create great wayfinding as well. And that's a great solution for it. They're using it, by the way, in Billund Airport and Copenhagen Airport as we speak today. So these are some of the situations that we should avoid. One thing is to have one ANPR camera reading cars approaching and leaving the area. I would definitely not recommend that. For instance, if you had a scenario to the left, right, you would usually encounter an issue with cars coming, and then sometimes the camera is going to have a hard time distinguishing these number plates because they are blocking each other. Second part is, if you have, for instance, an area like this, I would recommend you guys to use one ANPR camera one way, like we have the scenario over here, for instance. So this is definitely the right way to do it. So when we have, this is a complete solution with loops. It's not required from our side, from our part, that you have to use loops. Our cameras does. Usually the reason why you would be using loops previously is when you don't have such a strong algorithms in terms of knowing when to read, because many manufacturers have ANPR cameras that are not as, what to say, clever, or they're not as AI based as ours, because our ANPR cameras, what they do is, first of all, they look for a car, a shape of a car. Once they find the shape of a car, then they snapshot the number plate. If there is a car without a number plate, it will still get snapshot just as a car without a number plate. If you are using so if you're sitting in the office with a paper with the number plate on it and trying to test out this camera, it's not supposed to work. So we have had some installers trying to get that to work, but it didn't, because it's not meant to work. So we don't want any false reading. The downside of using a camera that doesn't do that is, it's gonna end up in some situations reading logos on cars. That could be somebody passing by with a board, or a t-shirt with a lot of text on the back walking, and then the camera might be reading it. So that's why I would recommend Dahua's AI-based ANPR cameras. They would definitely make the difference. And then we have confidence level. Confidence, obviously, when I'm saying confidence, I'm referring to the OCR algorithm, obviously. It's going to be very hard to recognize number plates if we have a number plate that's completely covered in snow, or if it's completely fogged, or it's just a dirty car. It's going to be difficult. And when we are testing out, configuring our ANPR camera, I'm going to show you in a minute, then you could see that we can actually set up a OSD part for the overlay, which is showing us how high is the confidence to read these number plates that are coming, so that we know if we need to do some changes for the angle or zoom in or zoom out on the camera. And then we can check if the confidence increased in terms of recognizing that there is a car, but also recognizing to read these number plates. All right. So that was the requirements and solution part and product selection. I hope it made it much more clear for you guys in order to understand how to set up all of this part. Now we are going to go to the the setup of the camera. So if anybody wants to connect to a camera, I have plenty here. Just say so, and I'm going to give you access to one, and you can sit and play around with it. So, but I'm going to try to connect to mine here. I'm going to show you. Yeah, sure. No problem, Dino. Let me just give you access to one. Just give me a sec. Just a second. I'm just gonna send you a message, Dino. Great. This is the access for the camera and an NVR as well. All right. So let's go to the settings of it. Can all of you guys see the picture from the camera? Great. Okay. So the first thing is, obviously, as I said, evaluate the scene, if it's suitable for it or not. If it's not, obviously find another place. Next part is to use the guide over here. Did you get the access, Dino? So the first thing I'm gonna do over here is, if I'm happy with the location of it, then the next part I'm gonna do is go to the guide button. I'm gonna check up if I have the right firmware. And by the firmware, by the way, the firmware that I'm using over here is from the 5th of November 2020. So I'm gonna add that to when I'm sharing the I'm gonna share that with the PowerPoint as well. So don't worry. I assume that some of you guys would like to have the firmware that I'm using, right? I guess. So next part is, I need to actually move my camera closer in order to finding the right size. So in my situation, obviously I'm just simulating it from a screen. And once I'm simulating it from a screen, it might end up giving me a little bit of an extra blur, and the lighting might not be the best because I'm sitting in a room with a lit screen and not enough light for the camera to actually distinguish how the real lighting conditions is. I'm cheating a little bit. So that's why I need to make sure, first of all, place the camera approximately where I want to. Just that guy a little bit. Somewhere around that, I think, is not bad. Somewhere around there is not that bad. I think it could need a little bit more adjustment, but I think we are pretty okay to go. So what I'm gonna do here, first of all, is I'm gonna run the video, and then where I think I want to snapshot the number plates, this is where I'm gonna stop the video. Obviously, you don't have the same possibility in the real hand scenario. You could just place a car right over there, or if there is a lot of traffic, you could just click snapshot once you think this is where I wanted to read the number plate. Once you've done that, you can go in and locally zoom in. So then we have this box over here. This box is only for reference, so it doesn't matter where it is once you leave it. This is just for reference, just for the guidance of it, because it says over here, this is somewhat how the number plate should be in terms of size. Mine is a little bit undersized, so I should be reading the number plates a little bit closer. But let's just try to give it a go. We can always adjust it. Then once you're happy with it, then you click check pixels. Oh, let me just go back a minute. Then we make sure we have the correct size here again, and that's it. So the next part is, then we choose where we want to read the number plates. So by default, this box is already drawn. So I can just go ahead and redraw this. So this means this is where I want to read number plates within this box. And when I click the snapshot line, this is approximately where I want to snapshot the number plates. Then I reckon that the size is going to be okay. So the only thing I have to consider is, obviously, the only thing about the scenario which isn't perfect is that the cars could be driving to the side of it. But I think we are pretty okay to go. And then I just click finish. I can always go ahead and adjust this. So if I'm not happy with the settings, I can click over here in the configuration part, and then I can click the manual focus, and then I could always zoom in a little bit. I can always go ahead and redraw that identification area. So what about the shield area? The shield area is, once I click that, I get to draw. So once I click over here, I get to draw 4 points, and then I right click, and then it's going to join it. So this means whenever there is a car or anything else within this area, it's not going to be recognized or not going to be read, because I'm not interested if there is any. That could also be a street sign. So if there is a car in the area and there is a street sign, it might be confused into thinking that this is part of the car. So I might be trying to read some of that. So in order to avoid stuff like this, we're going to block this area. Then I can choose Europe over here and confirm and confirm. Down here, I can adjust the illumination over here. I can choose which should be the value over here from when it turns from colored to black and white. So the higher the number is, the quicker it will change from colored to black and white, the more sensitive it is. So, and down here I can choose which should just be the general illumination intensity of the camera. And then I could choose, should the intensity be a little bit higher whenever there is a car approaching, then I can increase it here. Obviously, this could never be lower than the one that we have up here, because this is the general IR. And that's when we are talking about only the night function. All right. So if I go back to my live, I'm good to go. Let's try out and see how it reads, how it works. Once you just make sure that you have clicked this one if you are sitting and playing with it, because if I click this one, it's gonna show me the number plates. If this one is not enabled, then I can't see anything. Whatever I'm seeing over here is what it's capturing. And once it's capturing, when I'm using this on a web browser, it's going to save it on my laptop right now. So I'm just going to run those cars. Let's see how we do. Oh, maybe my area is not wide enough. Maybe I blocked off too much of it. Let's just try to see. Try to see. Yeah, maybe I blocked off too much of it. Just give me a sec. Just restore everything. Let me adjust the angle a little bit as well. Just need to refresh this guy. Actually, to be honest, if you just stick to the default settings, it's gonna work quite well. So it's going to be adjusting in terms of this part as well already. Just adjust my car plates a little bit. There we go, we got a number plate. Got another number plate over there, but it could need a little bit of an adjustment. So this was the simple way of setting up the ANPR. Just follow the guide, that's it. You should be pretty good to go. And then I'm gonna show you what different things you can adjust in terms of reaching a better accuracy as well, or increasing the efficiency or the confidence, sorry. So this was the simple part. Now we need to try to see if the number plates are in the right size, checking the pixels. So what we are gonna do here is, either we can just go ahead, whenever I click this button, then it's gonna be capturing a number plate. Whenever I click this button, I can just click it whenever, and then it's going to capture the number plates. So then I can go back in my folder where it saves all the pictures and check the size of the number plate over there. I can see them over here. So right now we are pretty good, you can tell. But if I go in here, I can search for one of the pictures. I'm just gonna open up this one. Local, picture download, alarm, and then the date of today, the hour of today. Manual snapshots were the one I captured. But I can go ahead and check on those that has been captured automatically now and see if those sizes are fine. So if I go ahead and right click this one, let me just try to use this one, for instance. Right click this one. I'm going to open it up with Paint. This is just to measure if it's correct. And then I'm going to click this select button up here. And then I'm going to draw this approximately where the plate is. And down here in the bottom to the left side, I can tell the width of it. So it's 139 in the width. So that means I'm very satisfied with the width of the number plate. So that means the zoom in and zoom out, the distance is fine. All right, does it make sense? The same goes with this. The distance should be fine right now. You can see I have big enough size over here in the width of the number plate. So I've got to block off this area, shield this area. Okay, so the next part I want to do is I want to increase the accuracy even more. You can see it's reading it quite well. I can go into my settings, and then I can go ahead and choose by default over here. You can see in my first settings up here, it says, do I only want to capture the approaching cars? Unfortunately, I have tried sometimes where it's not working that well, but this would filter out some cars that are driving the other way, not to get capture the number plate of them. That's fine. Next thing I need to do, if I'm using any loop, I need to set it up here that it should be using the loop to trigger whenever the snapshot needs to be captured. So, but in the sense that we're using it right now, we're just using the camera to determine everything by itself and snapshot by the green line. Then we just keep it as a video part. Okay. And then the next part is over here. We can choose which loop should open up or close and so on and so on, and when we are controlling the loops. So next part is inside the intelligence part. By default, everything is fine. It says that there should not be the same number plate should be filtered if it's within the first 5,000 milliseconds. So we don't have a ANPR that's reading the same number plate like 10 times within the same second or something. So that's fine. Over here we have a guidance for the scene. It's telling us if our camera is installed at a 1 to 3 meters height where the cars are approaching. When we click that one and confirm, then the algorithm is optimized for that type of reading. It's going to be expecting the cars are coming from the front and from that height, from that angle. So that's that part. Then we have the OSD part. This is where we can actually add in to see the confidence filtering. So I'm gonna click the snapshot. Over here, I have a lot of different possibilities. I don't know if you saw it earlier on my pictures. On the top of it, I had some black bar up there where I could tell some different information, the timestamp and so on in the plate. So over here, I'm going to be adding the confidence. I'm gonna say confirm. Once I've done that, I can go back to my live view. So now you can see there is a confidence filtering up here. It says for the plate, there is a 90% confidence, and that this is a vehicle has a 99% confidence. So that means we're doing great. We are very satisfied with the result. Everything is set up correctly and the distance, everything is fine. So this is kind of our benchmark. So if we zoom out a lot, then this one is going to be decreasing quite a lot. So you guys can try to do that. I can also try to do that from over here. Obviously now my lines are completely off. Let me try to draw. And now the car might be too small for it to read. Now I'm also just simulating it, so it's not gonna be the real scenario. But this is how you can check zooming in and zooming out if there's going to be a difference in terms of the confidence. So next part I want to adjust is if I go into my settings, I can go ahead and play around with my block list allow list. This is actually one of the greater features as well. In order to, when you have a barrier, for instance, it's quite important that we have as good reading as possible, but also as forgiving a reading as possible. So when we go in here in the fuzzy matching, what it does is when you enable the fuzzy matching, you get a lot of options in here you can add in. So let's assume that we are reading a number plate, which is allow listed into a premises where there's a gate. Let's assume the camera doesn't succeed reading the last character, or if there's some snow or something, or then we can enable this one. Then it's still going to be opening up the gate because it says, all right, I got one character off. The gate should open because there is a very high possibility that this is the same. So if you have super high security, I wouldn't recommend you to use the fuzzy matching feature, but for general use, definitely use it. Or if there is a redundant reading, like one reading is one character is read twice in the end of it, you can enable it. Or if there is a mismatching character, generally, it can tolerate one difference. For that could be the first letter would have been misread. For instance, if there was an 0 instead of an O, for instance, then you can choose that one. But even better, the equivalent matching, because as I said before, sometimes a B could look like an A, or an A could look like a B. Oh, sorry. Or a 0 could look like an O, or a O could look like a 0. And I can go on and go on. So when we already know that there could be, oh, sorry. When we know that there could be some of these challenges, then the camera is going to be confirming the rest of the number plate. And if there is some mistakes in this part, it's going to correct itself. So then at the end of the day, we have a very smooth operation of the opening of the gate. In here in the allow list, right now, you can see I have a lot of cameras over here. I can just go ahead and add another one. And then card ID, I just type in whatever. We have to add the card ID here. Vehicle name, James A. Click save. So if I search again, I should have 11. And I think it was this one. So this is how I add it. I can also export this. I can export the whole list. Go in here, allow list. Over here, if I wanted to add some cars, I can just copy those and then just correct the dates from when they should be allowed, and then the number plate and name. That's it. So once I've done that, I can import it again directly into the camera. I can import that one, and then it would be added to the list. So that's the way to use the allow list directly in the camera. And obviously it has to be enabled here. The block list is exactly the same. No difference there. Then we have, the barrier control. Barrier control is super important. In the barrier control part, we have the possibility to actually either just use the allow list in the camera, but we can also order it from a server. So right now I have a server running with DSS Pro, where I'm going to add it here. Oh, sorry. That's it. It says it's online. Over here, I can enable or disable this one. This just means that if it's offline, then what should be happening? Then the camera should go back to using its own allow list. All right? Because whenever I add a number plate in the VMS, it's going to add it to the camera as well. So I can also go ahead and manually open up and close over here to check if everything is working. I can also set a specific period for if I want the barrier to stay open between 8 and 4 o'clock p.m. Until that all the cars that are coming in there should be allowed to go in. Whenever it's after those hours, there should be a verifying with allow list and block list. Down here, I can choose whichever relay I want to use for opening up the barrier. And I can hear a click up there. So the first two are optical, so you won't be able to hear those. So the third one is the physical, where you can hear it. So over here, you can choose the signal duration. How long time should it trigger for? If you're using many barrier systems, they just need a signal like 1 second. That's enough. And then it will stay open until the second loop is triggering it to close. So, but if you want the barrier, if you're using a more simple solution, just the barrier and the camera, then obviously you would want the barrier to stay open for a longer period. So you can control it 100% from over here. This is the closing barrier, which one should trigger that one. So that's how to set up the block list and allow list over here and add it to a platform as well. Down here in the camera part, this is where I can choose some of the settings. We already went through the colored and black and white. If you're really challenged in terms of reading number plates correctly, you can always choose to go over to black and white all the time. then you'll have a better possibility. Since I'm using a monitor and all my cameras are in black and white and it's reflecting, it's not making things easier right now, but in the real life scenario it would be much better. And the accuracy I'm getting, the accuracy you should be getting in the real life scenario would be even better, because I'm just simulating some of this. So I'm just gonna let it adapt to it by itself. When we go into the shutter speed, the exposure part, I can, by default, it's set to manually. So this means it's already adapted to low light performance. So whenever it gets dark, it should work quite well as well. I can also go ahead and manually adjust it. So when I adjust it, it's gonna get darker, but the shutter speed will be better. So that means I'm gonna get a much more clear image of the car. I won't get this blur effect. So I can also set it to auto and it should also be fine. From my test, it works perfect even with auto settings. So this was more or less the settings of the camera directly. Then we also have the abnormality over here. If I go to my event, go to my abnormality. Some people are sometimes mistaken, by the way, when they go into alarm and see relay out, they think that they need to enable any of these relay. The only thing that happens when you enable these relay is that you're triggering it all the time. So if you want to set up the ANPR camera and not get a relay to trigger constantly, then don't use any of this stuff. You don't have to set up any of this. But for the abnormality part, that could be, for instance, a blocklisted car enter the premises and you're just using a camera. You enable it over here, and then you could choose which relay should open, or if any relay should even open. Signal duration, enable the email, then you're gonna get an email sent whenever there is a blocklisted car. And the email settings, obviously, are set up in here in the SMTP settings. So last but not least, the storage part over here, we can get it to store everything on an FTP directly, local if you're using an SD card, FTP client set up here. And it's also going to show you where it's saving the pictures by default whenever you're connecting it directly to a laptop or anything. This is the path that's saving it on. So obviously all the date and time and the obvious settings, and then you can also export the whole configuration. So let's assume everything goes bad, camera breaks or something happens, then you can always just use this exported feature, use the exported file, import it to another camera, and then you're good to go. You don't have to set up everything from scratch. All right. So when we go into the query part of the camera, this is where we can search for the cars. If we had an SD card, then you'd be able to search and you'll get all the images of all the cars coming in. If you don't have an SD card like me right now, then I could go ahead and search for the captured record search over here. And then I can find the whole list of cars that have been added, that has been captured by my camera, and I can export it. And then I'm gonna get an exported list over here. I'm getting the list over here. I can go ahead with, I'm sorry that I can tell that our session is a little bit longer than expected. I hope you guys can bear with me. So this is where I can see the block, it says N, that means no, which country, which direction, obverse, and then all the number plates and the dates as well. You can adjust this where you get the where you can get this structured a little bit more. There you go. I have everything structured over here now. That's just an Excel feature. So I get all the information I need over here. So this was all the settings in the camera in itself. Let's try to go to the NVR. What I want to do is obviously add the camera first of all to my NVI. I think I already added it. No, it's not. Yeah, there it is, 127. Once I've added it, then I can go to my settings in the AI mode. Region is actually just the country where it's from. It's not mandatory to use for anything. I think the most important part is it can also mistaking some of the countries, but in the most important part for you is the number plate and the timestamp, and if it's block listed or allowed listed, right? But region is the country. So over here in my AI settings, I can go into the parameters, and then I go to my ANPR part. I choose which channel my ANPR is running at. In here, I can control whatever do I want to have happening whenever there is a car that approaches the number plate camera, which is not block listed or allow listed, which is a stranger car, kind of, right? Then I could choose to trigger any relay. And now we're talking about the the relays in the NVR directly over here. So that could be a lamp or anything I wanted to trigger. I can control if I have, for instance, a PDZ camera also in the same area where I have set up a specific preset to look at that area. I can enable that by choosing the PDZ if the PDZ is channel 5, and then choose preset 2 if that's the location. Then whenever there is a stranger car, the PDZ is going to go over there and look at the area, so you actually get a complete recording of what happened, which way did the car drive after it got triggered by the ANPR camera. So all these settings I can apply, and then also I have the block list, allow list as well over here. I can set up different settings for whichever I want to. So, or even I can add a audio file on my NVR. So that screen that's connected to the NVR is going to play that sound whenever there's a block listed car or allow listed car. So down here in the database, this is the important part. In the allow list in here, I can search for a specific plate, see if it's in my allow or block listed. I get it, the difference here, the type. I can also just choose, I only want to see the allow listed. Then I can add another one, just like the ANPR. I can add it here. Import, download the template, export, same. Block listed, do the same part for that. And then I could go all the way out to my camera. And then I should, if my number plate camera is triggering correctly, I should be able to get all those number plates up here on the right side. Just a sec. Let's check if I'm getting those number plates. I think I just forgot to enable something. But then I would be able to get all those number plates over here on the side of it. Yeah, there you go. So this is how it's showing. When I double click this one, I get the picture of it. And if I'm recording everything, I would also get the recording of it. I haven't set my NVR to record it, but if I was recording it, then I would be able to play back. So I think it's quite obvious and simple for you guys to see, right, how the NVR works. So let's go to the last part of it. That's the platform part. Yeah, by the way, let's try, before we go over there, let's try to go ahead and see how the search possibilities are. I go over to my monitor vehicle detection, channel 3. Then I could choose the time frame for when I want to search. And then you see I get the cars that I'm capturing right now. I can just click those, and then I can also do a backup of it. When I'm doing a backup, I'm getting the picture and the video recording of it if it's recorded in my NVR. I can also just export it, then I would get it in a list, all these number plates that are exported. So I can also over here choose to only find the cars that are white, for instance. Kind of a metadata search. Then all the cars that are white, I'm going to find them over here. So this is the possibilities that we have from an NVR. So I hope it's quite clear. Video format is going to be the original format, the DAV format, which I would recommend. Then you can always, with the player, convert it, or any other converter, convert it, because we want to have the original file format. Once we I think even you get the possibility to convert it while you're backing up, but I would recommend to keep the original format, because once you're keeping the original format, there is no talk about any tampering. You can also do a watermark test on that recording as well. So this is my recommendation. Keep it in the raw format, then you can always convert it as long as you have the original with you. So let me try to go over to my platform part. This is the DSS V8. This is how it looks. So the first thing I need to do is, obviously, I have to have a license. I'm gonna go through the license part and DSS in a separated webinar. So if you haven't already signed up for that one, go ahead and do it. Find it on our Facebook page. That's the easiest way. If I go over to, if I've added the license already, then I can go to my entrance part. Obviously, I have to add in the storage part if I want to store all the images. So that's done on my server. I'm gonna go into the entrance part, and then over here, let me just delete this one first. Then I can create a parking. I have to create a parking if I wanted to use the ANPR part. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a closed parking with cars coming in, or number plates, cameras from each side of it for the entrance and exit. So I'm gonna create a parking lot called DH Office. Let's just add in 100 spaces. It's not necessary if you're not using this as a parking lot monitoring system. And open up the barrier. So this means that it's gonna open up the barrier on any car. And over here, also exiting barrier. That's gonna trigger the relay all the time. So you can choose whichever you want. You can always just adjust it as well. And what should happen when the number reaches 0? No entry, or allow everybody to go in. And we're gonna allow everybody to go in because we are not using it with a complete barrier system. Next, then it asks me to add the ANPR channels. Just do something here. So over here, I can choose from the camera. So clicking my camera over there, okay, and choose which direction. So since I'm only using one camera, that's fine for me. I'm just gonna use it as the in. I can add the VTO if I had it, or we have some displays meant for guidance. So wayfinding, you can add displays for that as well with DSS Pro. Next part, we don't have any LED, so we're just gonna save, and that's it. So now we have set up our parking lot. We have added one camera only. We don't have any exit. We don't have any signs set up to it. Then I'm gonna go out in the home part, and then over here in the classic, we can go ahead and choose the entrance part. Then we go over here in the entrance part, and then we get the cars coming in here, and then we get the pictures as well. So if I was storing on my server as well, I would be able to play those videos directly from over here. The sec. Is that to adjust something over here? That's it. Okay. So this was how to live monitor directly. When I click my mouse over here, I can also manually remote open up the barrier directly from over here. So, and you can also see that from the bottom over here that I can open up the barrier directly. So the next part of it is, what about if I want to add this camera to a map and also want to utilize more features, trying to search for cars, add them to the database, and so on and so on. So what I'm gonna do over here is I'm going to go back to my resources. In here, I can add a map. I have the Google map, first of all. Then I can add in wherever I want it to start. For instance, instead of starting at our HQ, I can set the longitude and latitude. Then it's gonna start at where I'm located, and then I can add multiple smaller maps here, or I can also add maps directly from here. Add child map, add in the picture. There we go, maps. That's just as an example. DH office. And then I could double click in here, add in my cameras. There you go. I just have this camera and I just want to move it a little bit. There we go. So I'm satisfied with it. So then I can go back. Then the other part is, what about if I wanted to add some number plates to my, to my block list allow list from the server side of it, since I had already connected the camera with the server. So what I'm gonna do here is I can go ahead in my personal information, add a person, add an ID, then Farhan, and then I'm gonna go ahead in the, obviously if I add them all, I add here, then I can also use it with other devices, access control, VTO, so on and so on. I'm gonna go in here in the authentication. Down here I can add in a number plate. This is my number plate. That's it. How many spots should be available for me? And then I can click OK. So once I've added this part, I can go in here in my vehicle information. I can do a search. Then you could see already I'm added in here. But I want to add my number plate to a specific parking lot for a specific location. Then I go in here. Then once I get this possibility, I can choose parking lot, DH office. That's it. I can choose from which year to year, which year should I be allowed to enter. For mine, it's 10 year now. I assume at least to be here in 10 years more. And then I can also go ahead, click next, and choose which camera should I be connected to. So I get lots of more versatility when I'm using the platform. Save. That's it. So this is where I can also just add in cars directly here. And then the same thing, choose the number plate, or even if the same car, sorry, if the same person has multiple cars, I can also add in multiple cars. It would refer to the same person. And then I can sync that information with the cameras, whichever camera needs to be connected to me, for instance, where I should be allowed to get inside. So this is how to set up the allow block list part. I can always go ahead in here and change this to block list. So that means now I'm blocked. All right. So let's try to go to the search part of it in the ANPR. I'm still in the entrance module, information search, choose which channel. I want to search throughout all my channels, even though I'm only using that 127 now. Then I can do a search. If I had the snapshots of entry and exit, I would get all the exit pictures as well. So this gives me the possibility to see snapshots from each car that came in here. And I can also export that data as well. If I had the recording directly in my platform, I could see the recordings over here as well. So another part is I can search if I'm using the vehicle parking lot feature. I can check which cars are entering my parking lot right now inside it, and also the snapshots over here. Complete snapshots and playback feature, and just go ahead and export it. So I hope that part is very clear for you guys. When I go over here to my entrance overview, now I can see I have 29 cars that came into my parking lot since I set this part up. So then I get a lot of great statistics over here. I can also verify which specific time frame is the busiest. Do I need to get more staff to attend to something in terms of that? That could also be, for instance, a car renting company. If we have the tendency that people tend to return the cars at a specific time frame, we need to have more staff on the job to intercept these customers that are coming in here. So this is why this is great as well, to get statistics and everything. We can go back and see what about last year, what about last week and stuff. So if I wanted to create an alarm, this is more or less mostly part of the other webinar, but let's assume I wanted to create an alarm on my a blocklisted car. So what I would do is I would go into my resources. I would choose the camera first of all. That's this one. And then I could add an event in here. If I wanted to set the recording, if my server was recording, I could set it up here to record whenever this event happens. But event information, access alarm, blocklisted alarms, what should happen? What should happen is this block list should only be triggering an alarm to my platform within this time frame. Then I could choose which user should it be linked to. Only the system user, that would be me right now. And then if the same thing with the PDZ, if I wanted to trigger some PDZ, if I had some PDZs here, what should happen? I also want, for instance, the picture from this camera to be showing. I also wanted to have this camera showing, or a completely different camera or PDZ. I could choose store on the server, open up, trigger the snapshot. If I only have some storage enabled, then this is possible. But this one will get the images to pop up. These three cameras would be popping up. If I had added just a regular map, I could also see it on the map as well, the camera to the map, and I have already done that over here, as you saw earlier. I could choose to email this to someone specific whenever there's a blocklisted car. I could open up some specific relay outputs on any device. That could be anything. Or link access control systems. So whenever this car comes in, the door should be completely shut. He shouldn't be able to get inside. So that's more or less it. Apply. Okay. So if I go back to my viewing, my entrance over here, then whenever a blocklisted car will come in here, it would be saying here, and then it would be popping up the alarm part up here, saying that now there's this event happening because I set it up as an event. So this was more or less what I had for you guys. I hope it was useful for you in terms of ANPR entrance solutions, what's possible with a platform, what's not possible with a standalone solution, what's possible with an NVR. So yes, I have actually recorded the complete webinar already, so don't worry. So everything is going to be recorded, and we're going to send out all of this later on next week to everybody with the recorded webinars, the PowerPoints, and everything. So don't worry, you'll get all the information you need. So going back to, does anyone have any questions regarding the platform here? Generally, you are allowed to recognize number plates. You can choose if you only want to save those number plates. I think, I don't remember if I can see where it was. I think it's somewhere around in the, I can find, yeah, over here you could choose how often would you like this to be deleted automatically. By default, it's set to 180 days. In terms of GDPR, you can choose how often do you want this information to be deleted within. So that should be safe for you to use in terms of complying with GDPR. You can also delete all the images. All you can actually get all the information deleted by default. Like set it to delete all of the recordings within 30 days. So that shouldn't be a problem, or 6 days, or whatever you want to. Okay. So since you guys don't have anything in terms of questions for this part, let's go back to the PowerPoint. So nobody has anything else to add to it? Any questions whatsoever? Then I don't think there's anything more to add, but thank you very much for joining. This has been great for me as well, and thank you for all the interesting questions and feedback. And if there's anything else you think I didn't answer, just go ahead and let me help you out with some of those solutions. But you're going to be able to watch these webinars again since we have been recording them. So last part is, to the left side, you'll be able to see my LinkedIn information. You're going to be able to connect to me directly like that. I have we have the Facebook page called Dahua Technology Nordic. Please go ahead and follow that. We share a lot of interesting information in terms of these webinars, these scheduled webinars, when to register, how to register. Everything is there. We do a lot of different interesting tests as well. Some of you guys already are registered to follow Dahua Technology Nordic, so you guys would know. We have a lot of different interesting tests and content we share over there, so please go ahead and follow us. And last but not least, which is very, very valuable to me as well, is to get some feedback from you guys. Please give me some feedback by scanning the QR code to the right side and tell us what we should have done better. Which things would you think could have been improved? Obviously, there's always room for improvement. So for us, it's important that we keep on elevating our trainings and keep on adding value to you guys and pinpoint the more interesting parts and leave out the less interesting part for you guys. So I'd really, really appreciate it if you had scan that one and give me some feedback on the right side as well. But thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you at the next webinar. And thank you for paying attention. I hope it's been valuable to you guys and you feel confident in terms of installing ANPR solution more than ever. And make sure to play around with some of these cameras, order them for your offices, play around with it, because now your memory should be quite fresh about this stuff. So now it's the most important for you guys to try it out. All right. So thank you very much. I'm going to stay here for a little bit while longer if you have any questions or anything. Okay. But thank you very much and take care. Bye-bye. Thank you, guys. You're welcome, guys. And thank you for staying around. Great. I'm happy that it confirms some issues that you met, that there is a reason to it, Frederick. Thank you very much, Doc, Jim, and Gunnar.